Hola, my name is Ed Cabrera. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of San Luis Obispo County, I welcome you to our discussion of the pros and cons of California's Proposition 50. You would not be viewing this presentation unless you were committed to being an educated voter. So the League salutes you for taking your civic duty seriously. We also thank the League of Women Voters of North San Diego County for their sizable contribution to the construction of this presentation. Just a little bit about the League before we get started. As you may know, the mission of the League is to encourage informed and active participation in government and increase understanding of major public policy issues. For example, we organize and moderate candidate forums, we register voters, and we provide informational talks about issues on the ballot, which is what we'll be doing today. We are proudly nonpartisan. We neither support nor oppose candidates or political parties at any level of government, but we do work on issues of concern to our members and to the public, and our advocacy arm does sometimes take a position on these issues. However, we are here today as representatives of the educational arm of the League, and so we will remain neutral on the propositions, and will show both the arguments for and against each one. By the way, we are proudly an all-volunteer grassroots organization. Before we begin, a disclaimer about the pro and con arguments you are about to see. They come from the supporters and opponents, and you can read them for yourself in the official voter information guide sent to you as a voter from the state of California. We really can't vouch for their accuracy as we do not have the means to do so. They do not represent our official League of Women Voters viewpoint, as we have not taken a stand on the proposition. They do reflect the opinions of the supporters and opponents, and again, they may not necessarily be based on facts. So why are we here in a year that is typically not an election year? A special election has been called by the governor and our legislature to vote on a proposed amendment to our Constitution. This proposal has been placed on the ballot as Proposition 50. And it reads, Proposition 50 authorizes temporary changes to congressional district maps in response to Texas partisan redistricting. And if you think that I am guilty of some creative editing, you will want to read your voter information guide and even your ballot, and you'll see that we have written it as reflected on those two items. A bit of background for you. The Constitution gave each state the right to elect at least one representative for every 30,000 of their inhabitants. Since 1929, that number was changed to a maximum of 435 representatives throughout the nation. Each of these representatives represents a portion of their state called a district. We appropriate these districts among the states according to the census count every 10 years. The more people a state has, the more representatives are allotted to the state. California has 52 representatives, and each represents about 760,000 people. Each representative votes to determine the budget and negotiate the policy priorities for our nation. Well, the question is, who draws the congressional district maps in our state? Prior to 2008, legislators drew lines, or the court did if the legislatures failed to carry out this duty properly. In 2008, voters approved the Voters First Act, We Draw the Lines, or better known as Proposition 11, which established a nonpartisan commission to draw the maps for the State Senate, State Assembly, and the Board of Equalization. In 2010, Proposition 20 was approved, and this added a commission to draw the federal congressional maps. That proposition was sponsored by Charles Munger, whose name we'll see later. He's the main source of funds for the No on Prop 50 campaign. So, as a result of Proposition 20's passage, California now has a CCRC. You will find this result in Article 21 of the California Constitution. It's the epitome of fairness because we have an equal number of Republicans and Democrats, 5 of each, and 4 representatives who are not affiliated with either one of these parties. In other words, they're independents. And finally, it does require the district lines to be drawn in conformity with nonpartisan rules. I'll give you 2 examples. Districts must comply with the Voting Rights Act to ensure that minorities have a fair opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. Also, districts must be drawn contiguously so that all parts of the districts are connected to each other. In most states, the state legislatures draw congressional district maps with or without the help of advisory committees. The remaining states, only California, Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Michigan, New York, Washington, and Montana use independent commissions to draw congressional lines. Members of these commissions are neither legislators nor public officials. Each state, other than Colorado and New York, also bans commissioners from running for office in the districts they draw for at least a few years after the commission finishes its work. Every 10 years, after the U.S. Census is completed, states draw new congressional district maps to reflect their number of House representatives and to rebalance the number of people in each district so that districts have roughly equivalent population. This process is called redistricting. Each state decides what process to use to draw its new district maps. When drawing new maps, each state must follow federal laws. For example, each congressional district in the state must represent about the same number of people. States typically only draw congressional district maps every 10 years, unless a court orders changes to comply with the law. The districts that we presently have were determined after the 2020 census by our independent commission. Let's provide some background and context to this action before we get into the details of the actual proposition. This past summer, the president asked the state of Texas to redraw their congressional maps in order to give or to keep an advantage for the Republican Party in the House. As a result, their legislature quickly passed the bill to adopt these new maps, which would increase the number of seats in Texas held by the Republican Party. As a result, Governor Newsom fought back with an action of his own, and he asked the legislature to pass a bill to offset the Texas action. So in August, Assembly Bill 604 was passed by both houses, but the bill cannot take effect without voter approval. Although states must by law redistrict every 10 years after each census, there's no legal impediment to a state redrawing districts in the middle of the decade. It's unusual, however, for states to draw lines mid-decade. Typically, states redraw lines only when a court orders it to correct lines that violate election laws. Also, the U.S. Supreme Court in 2019 ruled that the Constitution does not prohibit partisan gerrymandering to increase a party's clout. Only gerrymandering that's explicitly done to discriminate along racial lines is unlawful. Proposition 50 would change the California Constitution to allow new maps approved by the state legislature in AB 604 to take effect and replace maps drawn by the Citizens Redistricting Commission. The new maps would be used in any congressional election through 2030, including those in 2026, 2028, and 2030. After the 2030 census, the commission would return to drawing district lines using the rules set out by law. The state would use these maps until the commission draws new district maps following the 2030 U.S. Census. Prop 50 would also retain California's Citizens Redistricting Commission and supports the use of fair, nonpartisan redistricting commissions nationwide. Note that all other maps, the maps for state senate districts, assembly districts, Board of Equalization districts, will remain the same. If Proposition 50 passes and works as designed, there would be a dramatic change to the mix of California representatives in the House. Democrats would now have more registered members of their party in 4 districts presently represented by Republicans as a result of the map changes. In addition, more Democrats would be added to 5 swing districts. Swing districts are defined as districts where there is almost an equal number of registered voters from each party in a district, and the vote could swing in either direction. The projected changes could result in a mix of 48 Democrats and 4 Republicans representing California in Congress. If you are a visual learner, this chart will be of some help in identifying some of the seat changes that may occur and how many seats will be made safe if all works according to the supporters of Proposition 50. You need to know that swing districts feature almost equal number of registered voters for each party, while safe districts give one party a decided advantage in registered voters. Districts 1, 3, and 41 would change from safe Republican seats to safe Democratic. Seat 48, held by Darrell Issa, would lose registered party voters, but not as much as the 3 districts already identified. David Valadao in District 22 has won 8 races in a row despite having a minority of Republican voters in his district, but will have even less Republican supporters as a result of the map changes. Finally, 5 Democratic representatives will see their districts transform from precarious swing districts to safe districts. Now, if Proposition 50 does pass, the Legislative Analyst's Office projects that the administrative cost for the map itself is minor, estimating a one-time cost of a few $1 million for counties and about $200,000 for the state to update election materials. The special election is estimated to cost California taxpayers $282 million. Of that total, counties will incur $251 million to conduct the election, which is a reimbursable expense from the state. The state will also incur millions of additional costs to send correction notices to voters after an error was discovered in the voter information guide. The individuals and organizations who have weighed in their support to Proposition 50: former President Barack Obama, California Governor Gavin Newsom, the California Professional Firefighters, the California Federation of Teachers, and by the way, also the California Teachers Association, the larger teachers union, a very active service union, SEIU, Indivisible California, the California chapter of Planned Parenthood, and of course the California Democratic Party. The arguments made in favor of Proposition 50. First of all, supporters caution that the prior system will be put back in place after 2030, and this is only a temporary plan. That this proposition, unlike other moves in other states, requires the approval of the voters. And even though it may not look like, in the long run, this proposition will create fair maps and protects us from gerrymandering, and there is a commitment to keep California a leader in fair elections. And finally, a reminder that this proposition is a counter to move made by Republicans in other states, and it will keep them from having an unfair advantage. Those who have come together to oppose Proposition 50 include philanthropist and physicist Charles Munger Jr., who was a force behind the institution of our prior Redistricting Commission, former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, former Speaker of the House and California Congressman Kevin McCarthy, the California Business Roundtable, the national organization Congressional Leadership Fund, and of course, the Republican Party of California. The arguments from the opponents include that this is just a naked power grab by California Democrats, that it does replace a system whereby the people had a hand in the drawing of maps, and it no longer will be a transparent system, that this will hurt fair representation as a result. And they remind you not to be fooled, that this will not be temporary. They claim that it will be permanent control of the redistricting process. And finally, that this special election would cost California taxpayers at least $200 million. Let's take a look at the monies raised by the proponents and opponents of Proposition 50. The proponents have raised over $121 million, led by the national organization, the House Majority Political Action Committee. They've chipped in $11 million, followed closely by the Fund for Policy Reform, largely funded by George Soros at $10 million. A couple of unions, CTA and the California Nurses Association, have also chipped in multi-million-dollar contributions. Then we have a trio of billionaire philanthropists, Tom Steyer, Mike Moritz, and Reed Hastings of Netflix fame. Then a $7 million contribution by the prominent political action committee, MoveOn.org. The opponents of Proposition 50 are led by philanthropist Charles Munger Jr. He has contributed over $30 million. You might remember that he was the catalyst for the original commission that was established and is present now and is promised to be reestablished after the 2030 census. Then there is the national organization on the Republican side, the Congressional Leadership Fund, that's going to be contributing $5 million. Their total is over $74 million. Now, it will be worth noting that small contributions, that means people giving less than $100, individuals. On the yes side, they have totaled $11 million. On the no side, they have totaled $7,500. I'm going to share a map which depicts dramatically the differences in the present situation and the proposed situation. If Proposition 50 fails, the map will maintain its present look, as you see on this map. Note that the far northeast portion of the state, where we'll find Shasta County, Inyo County, the smaller counties are Republican controlled, as is the area east of Los Angeles and the areas east of San Diego. This map will remain the same if Proposition 50 fails. If Proposition 50 passes, then we see a dramatic change. the entirety of Northern California will now be controlled by the Democrats. Also, more control will be given to them east of San Diego. So you see the more populated areas of California, the West Coast, will be controlled by the Democrats, and the less populated, more rural areas of California will be controlled by the Republicans. An overwhelming change to the congressional map. A logical question you might have is, how are our local maps going to change? Well, here's your graphic answer. District 19, which stretches from northern San Luis Obispo County all the way past Santa Cruz County into Santa Clara County, remains unchanged. Ditto for District 24. There will be no changes to the congressional map locally. So, once again, if you vote yes, you'll be supporting the amending of the California Constitution. This will allow the state to use a new congressional map for the elections of 2026, 2028, and 2030. If you vote no, you will oppose the amending of the California Constitution, and this will keep the congressional map that we have in place for use in elections from 2026, 2028, and 2030. Again, thank you for joining us in our effort to educate our community about a state proposition that will have historic implications for this state and country. Please join us online at this address to access more election resources, and consider joining our organization as we endeavor to advance democracy. Adios.